Hey, you wonderful people, this is Donna again. Welcome back to my channel. Listen to this podcast with me while I drive to work.
CEO panics without a French translator until the janitor's 12-year-old daughter shows up and closes $1 million deal. Damn it! This can't be happening. Richard Donovan's voice echoed through the corridors of Donovan Industries like a desperate roar. The 54-year-old CEO was literally sweating through his $3,000 suit as he paced back and forth in his office on the 40th floor. In exactly 45 minutes, executives from Groupe Marseille would arrive for the most important meeting in his company's history. $100 million in medical technology contracts depended on this presentation. And the professional translator had just called with a last-minute family emergency. Mr. Donovan, I've tried every translation service in town, his assistant Jennifer informed him, her voice trembling. It's the eve of a holiday, no one is available. The French are inflexible, French only, no exceptions. Richard loosened his tie, feeling the weight of 200 jobs on his shoulders. His family business, built over 30 years, could collapse completely if he lost this contract. The French had already warned that they did not reschedule meetings. It was today or never. There must be someone in this city who speaks French fluently, he shouted, pounding the table. Anyone. Then a small, clear voice came from the hallway. Dad, you forgot your wrench on the cart. Richard stopped abruptly. Through the half-open door, he saw a black girl of about 12 handing a tool to Joseph Williams, the janitor who had worked in the building for 15 years. The girl spoke to her father in perfect French, asking if he needed help with the equipment. Jennifer, Richard whispered, his eyes fixed on the girl. Did you hear that? Hear what, sir? That child. She was speaking French. Jennifer followed her boss's gaze and frowned. Sir, that's Amelia, Joseph's daughter. She just came to pick up her father because school let out early today. Richard watched the girl more closely. Amelia Williams wore a simple school uniform, worn sneakers, and carried a patched backpack. At 12, she looked completely out of place in the sophisticated corporate environment, like a wildflower growing out of concrete. But something in her eyes caught Richard's attention. There was an intelligence there, a serenity that contrasted dramatically with her own desperate agitation. When Amelia noticed she was being watched, she waved politely and smiled with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone so young. Joseph. Richard called impulsively, stepping out of his office. Can I talk to you for a moment? The janitor approached nervously, clearly uncomfortable with his boss's sudden attention. Is there a problem, Mr. Donovan? Your daughter, does she speak French? Joseph blinked, surprised. Yes, sir. Amelia is very intelligent. She taught herself French on the internet and at the library. She dreams of studying in France one day. Richard felt a spark of hope light up in his chest. What level of French? Well, Joseph hesitated, looking at his daughter. She talks to French tourists who visit the museum, where we do volunteer work on weekends. They're always impressed. Amelia approached, realizing she was the center of the conversation. Can I help you, Mr. Donovan? She asked in perfect English, but with a formality that revealed her careful upbringing. Richard knelt down to be at her level, his mind racing. This child could be his salvation or his ruin. Betting the future of the company on a 12-year-old girl seemed crazy, but what choice did he have? Amelia, I need someone who speaks fluent French for a very important meeting in 40 minutes. Would you feel comfortable helping out? Amelia's eyes sparkled with a mixture of curiosity and determination. What kind of meeting are we talking about? If this story of unlikely courage and unexpected opportunities touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple student was about to teach a lesson about underestimating people based solely on appearances. A very important business meeting, Richard repeated slowly, watching Amelia with a mixture of desperation and skepticism. It would be simultaneous translation for French executives discussing $100 million contracts. Amelia nodded with a seriousness impressive for her age. Child. It might not be appropriate. Papa, Amelia interrupted him softly in French. Let me show you what I can do. Then she turned to Richard in flawless English. Mr. Donovan, you need to know that I learned French because my late grandmother was from Haiti. She raised me speaking only French until I was 6, when she came to live with us. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. The girl had lost her grandmother, just as he had lost his father when he was the same age. But his business mind still resisted the idea. Amelia, this meeting is worth the future of the company. If something goes wrong, then you've lost everything, she replied with devastatingly simple logic. But if it goes right, you've gained everything. What's the real difference between trying with me or giving up completely? Jennifer approached discreetly. Mr. Donovan, the French have just confirmed. They'll be here in 35 minutes. And security says there are reporters from the Financial Times in the lobby. If this meeting fails publicly. Richard ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. His family business, built by his Italian immigrant grandfather, was literally in the hands of a 12-year-old black girl. The irony was cruel. He had always prided himself on being a progressive employer, but now that he really needed to trust someone outside his usual circle, he felt his unconscious prejudices rising. Amelia, he said finally, you understand that these men are extremely demanding? They test professional translators until they break them. They can ask complex technical questions. I know, she replied calmly. I've read about Groupe Marseille online. They're known for being difficult, but also for respecting genuine competence. Richard blinked in surprise. You researched them? When Dad told me there was an important meeting today, I was curious and did some research in the school library during break. Amelia smiled slightly. I learned that the CEO, Mr. Dubois, lost his wife 2 years ago in a medical accident that could have been prevented with better technology. That's why he invests heavily in medical innovation. Joseph looked at his daughter with pride and surprise. Even he didn't know Amelia had researched the visitors. Mr. Donovan, Jennifer whispered urgently, a message just came in from the French. They're stuck in traffic and will be here in 20 minutes. Richard felt the panic return. 20 minutes to turn a 12-year-old girl into a professional translator, or watch his company collapse in front of reporters and investors. Is there anything else I should know about you, Amelia? He asked, desperate for any sign that he wasn't making the biggest mistake of his career. Amelia hesitated for a moment, exchanging glances with her father. Well, I also speak German and Spanish, and I've been participating in debate competitions at school in French. I won 3 first places this year. Debate. Richard sat up straight. What kind of debate? Discussions about business ethics, corporate social responsibility, technological innovation. Amelia listed casually. My teacher says I have a knack for logical argumentation and presenting complex ideas. Richard looked at her in amazement. This was no ordinary child pretending to know French. She was a little intellectual who had unwittingly been preparing for this moment for years. Joseph, Richard turned to the janitor, why didn't you ever tell me that your daughter was so exceptional? Joseph looked down, embarrassed. Mr. Donovan, you've known my daughter for years, but you never asked about her. To you, we're just part of the furniture. The remark cut deep. Richard realized that he really did see Joseph as an invisible employee, efficient but irrelevant. He had never taken an interest in his personal or family life. And now he discovered that this humble man had raised an extraordinary daughter right under his nose. Mr. Donovan, Amelia said softly, you're worried because I'm young and black, aren't you? The direct question left him speechless. How had a 12-year-old girl identified the core of his fears so accurately? It's not that. It's okay, she interrupted him gently. I understand perfectly. But do you know what the advantage of being underestimated is? You can surprise everyone. As Richard struggled with his inner prejudices and the relentless clock, something in Amelia's determined gaze began to awaken a feeling he hadn't felt in years. The same spark of daring his grandfather had when he bet everything on a company no one believed would work. 15 minutes, Mr. Donovan, Jennifer announced, her voice heavy with tension as she watched Richard still paralyzed by indecision. Security has confirmed that the French executives have just arrived in the parking lot. Richard glanced at Amelia, who stood calmly beside her father, as if discussing million-dollar contracts was a routine part of her 12-year-old life. Something about that serenity bothered him. It was almost as if she had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Amelia, he said hesitantly, do you really understand the magnitude of what we're discussing here? If something goes wrong, 200 families lose their jobs before Christmas. I understand perfectly, Mr. Donovan, she replied with disconcerting maturity. But may I ask a question? Why are you more concerned with my age and appearance than my qualifications? The direct question left him speechless. Joseph shifted uncomfortably, clearly proud of his daughter's courage, but concerned about her boldness. Mr. Donovan, Jennifer interrupted, stepping closer, can I speak with you privately? Richard followed her a few steps, lowering his voice. Jennifer, this is crazy. Betting everything on a child. With all due respect, sir, Jennifer interrupted, something she rarely did in 15 years of employment. I grew up in the same neighborhood as Joseph and Amelia. I've known that family for years. Amelia is no ordinary child. Richard frowned, surprised. What do you mean? She won a full scholarship to Riverside Academy, the most competitive prep school in the city. At the age of 10, she competes in academic debate tournaments against high school students and wins regularly. Jennifer looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Donovan, Amelia Williams is a genius. And we're wasting her because she doesn't look like what we expect a genius to look like. Richard felt the weight of that revelation. Riverside Academy cost $40,000 a year and had a 5-year waiting list. How had a working-class family gotten a full scholarship? There's more, Jennifer continued. Amelia also speaks Mandarin and Arabic. She teaches French to immigrants on weekends at the local church. Voluntarily. 12 minutes, shouted an assistant from the hallway. Richard turned to Amelia, who had listened to the entire conversation without flinching. Why didn't you ever mention any of this? Because you never asked, she replied simply. For years, you greeted my father politely, but you never showed any real interest in getting to know our family. To you, we were just part of the scenery. The observation cut deep, echoing Joseph's words from minutes earlier. Richard realized that he had systematically underestimated the people around him based purely on appearances and unconscious biases. Amelia, he said, his voice changing in tone, if I'm entrusting this meeting to you, I need to know you can handle the pressure. These executives are known for testing translators until they break. They ask trick questions, change subjects abruptly, and use specific technical jargon. I know, she replied calmly. I read about their tactics online. Mr. Du Bois often asks questions about European medical regulations to test competence. Mr. Laurent likes to use regional French idioms to confuse American translators. Richard blinked, impressed. You researched them individually? During lunch at school. I also studied Groupe Marseille's annual reports for the last 3 years, their recent acquisitions, and the technical presentations they usually require. Amelia smiled slightly. Papa always taught me that preparation is respect. Joseph nodded proudly. My daughter never does anything halfway, Mr. Donovan. 10 minutes, echoed again down the hall. Jennifer approached with a folder. Mr. Donovan, I've prepared executive summaries in French about our technology, just in case. If Amelia can manage with the technical vocabulary. May I see them? Amelia interrupted politely. Jennifer handed her the documents. Amelia scanned them quickly, her eyes darting across the pages with impressive speed. After 2 minutes, she looked up. There are a few terminology errors here, she said diplomatically. On page 3, Intelligence Artificielle Medical would be more accurate as Système d'Assistance Diagnostique par IA. And on page 5, the term for predictive analysis is a little outdated. Jennifer and Richard exchanged incredulous glances. A 12-year-old was correcting technical documents prepared by professional translators. How do you know that? Richard asked, his voice betraying a mixture of admiration and disbelief. My grandmother worked in a hospital in Port-au-Prince before she came to the United States. She taught me a lot about medical terminology in French. Amelia paused, her eyes shining with a fond memory. She always said that the right words can save lives, so it was important to know them perfectly. 8 minutes. Richard made a decision that would change his life forever. Amelia, you're hired. But I need you to understand one thing. If these men sense any weakness, they will exploit it mercilessly. It's not personal, it's French business. I understand, Mr. Donovan, she replied with that disconcerting serenity. But can I give you some advice? Stop worrying about what they'll think of me and start focusing on why your technology can save lives. Genuine passion is universal in any language. As they walked toward the conference room, Richard noticed something extraordinary happening. Amelia's calm presence was transforming his own anxiety into determination. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about what could go wrong, but what could go right. "Mr. Donovan," Amelia said softly as they walked, "there's something you need to know about this meeting. Something that could completely change how you approach these executives." Richard stopped abruptly. "What do you mean?" "5 minutes." Amelia's eyes shone with a confidence that seemed impossible for her age, as if she knew something that would turn this desperate meeting into something completely different. Something that no adult in the company had considered, but that a brilliant young girl had discovered in her secret research on the most powerful men in the French medical industry. "Mr. Donovan," Amelia said calmly as they entered the conference room, "Mr. Dubois lost his 12-year-old daughter in a medical accident 2 years ago. Her name was Amelie, just like me but in French." Richard stopped abruptly. "How did you know that?" "I researched beyond the business reports. I read obituaries, newspaper articles, personal interviews." Amelia adjusted her school bag. "Mr. Dubois doesn't just invest in medical technology. He seeks redemption. He wants to save other children because he couldn't save his own daughter." 3 minutes. Richard felt something fundamental shifting in his perspective. He was no longer seeing a child trying to help a desperate adult. He was seeing a young strategist who had prepared better for this meeting than he had. The elevator doors opened with a sound that echoed like a bell of destiny. Mr. Philippe Dubois emerged first, a distinguished 62-year-old man with perfectly combed gray hair, wearing a dark gray suit that cost more than Joseph's annual salary. At his side, Mr. Laurent Rousseau, younger but equally imposing, carried an Italian leather briefcase and the expression of someone accustomed to disappointing ill-prepared Americans. Richard took a deep breath and approached them. "Gentlemen, welcome to Donovan Industries. I am." "Good morning, Messrs. Dubois and Rousseau," Amelia interrupted softly in French, stepping forward with the confidence of an experienced diplomat. "I am Amelie Williams, and I will be your interpreter today. I hope your flight from Paris was good and that you were able to rest despite the jet lag." The silence that followed was absolute. The two French executives were completely paralyzed, their expressions changing from professional skepticism to utter amazement. Not only because of the girl's perfect fluency, but because of the diplomatic elegance of her presentation and the genuine concern she showed. "My God," Dubois whispered in French, his eyes filling with unexpected tears. "Your accent, it's perfect. Where did you learn to speak like that?" Amelia smiled gently. "My grandmother was from Haiti, sir. She raised me speaking French until I was 6 years old. She always said that French was the language of the heart." Richard watched, fascinated, as something extraordinary happened. Dubois slowly knelt down until he was level with Amelia, his hands trembling slightly. "What is your name, my child?" "Amelie, sir. Like your daughter." The world stopped. Dubois closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, there was a humanity there that Richard had never expected to see in such a powerful executive. "Mr. Donovan," Dubois said in English heavy with emotion, "in 25 years of international business, I have never met a translator so young and so well prepared. But there is something more important here than business." Rousseau, equally moved, added, "This child has treated us with more respect and care in 2 minutes than many adults show in entire meetings." Richard felt his worldview shatter and rebuild simultaneously. For 40 minutes, as Amelia translated every technical nuance of the presentation with surgical precision, he watched a transformation he would never forget. It wasn't just translation. Amelia was able to capture the emotions behind the words, the unspoken fears, the hidden hopes. When Dubois asked complex questions about ethics in artificial intelligence, she didn't just translate, she contextualized, explained, humanized. "Mr. Dubois is asking if our technology can prevent the diagnostic errors that took his daughter away from him," Amelia translated softly, her words laden with genuine compassion. That's when Richard realized he wasn't just watching a business meeting. He was witnessing a session of emotional healing conducted by a 12-year-old girl who understood pain in a way that privileged adults could never comprehend. "Our technology," Richard replied, looking directly at Dubois, "exists to ensure that no parent ever has to go through what you went through." Amelia translated, but added something of her own. "And I can promise you, sir, that every time the technology saves a child, your Amelie will live on through that act of love." Du Bois broke down in tears. A man who controlled $100 million, crying openly in a conference room because a child had found the words his expensive therapists had never been able to offer him. Mr. Donovan, Du Bois said finally, wiping his eyes, we're not going to invest just the $100 million we discussed. Richard felt his heart race. We'll invest $200 million. And we want Amelie to be our official ambassador for this project. Rousseau nodded vigorously. This child understands the true purpose of medical technology in a way that adult executives take years to learn. Richard looked at Amelia, who remained calmly seated in her chair, as if securing the largest investment in the company's history was routine. There is one condition, Du Bois continued. We want to establish a comprehensive educational fund for Amelie. University, exchange program in France, everything paid for. This child should not be limited by financial circumstances. Joseph, who had watched everything in absolute silence, finally spoke. Gentlemen, I don't know what to say. Papa, Amelia said softly in English, remember how Mama always said that God put special people in our path at the right moments? I think today we have all been those special people for each other. As the contracts were signed and champagne was served, Richard realized something that would keep him awake for weeks. For years, he had walked down the hall ignoring Joseph and Amelia, seeing them as invisible parts of the corporate landscape. He never imagined that he was ignoring the very person who would save his company and change his perspective on what it really meant to recognize talent.